In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a live edition of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, or as we like to call these one-offs, Andrew and Jerry Can't Wait. You can join the conversation this morning, Jerry. Are you aware of this?
I'm already joining the conversation.
Oh, you know
Here
something? I need to be able to share this with you. But I'm Jerry. For clarity's sake, I will read the text. You can text us at 202-381-0083. I'll be repeating that number again. 202-381-0083. That's the text line here this morning. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers.
And we wanted to get together and do this. Jerry, how many times a day? I mean, you and I talk several times a day as it is.
We do.
But we have seriously in the last week been talking and texting and emailing each other multiple times because of what's going on in Ukraine and our perceptions. And we had a good conversation on Friday. It was an intense conversation. And Jerry and I agree on, I would say, even more things now than we probably agreed on Friday than we disagreed on. But there were areas that I wanted to come back to in light of, and I'm just going to go out here and say this, Jerry, in light of a tremendous amount of misinformation that is floating around and a misimpression as to what is going on the ground. Let me start here, Jerry. I don't want to monopolize, but I want to start here with a really basic thesis for everybody who is looking at this and watching what is happening on the ground in Ukraine and wondering who to believe and what to believe. And I started to write this as a tweet last night, and then I pulled back from it. But the draft tweet said essentially, here is one simple thing to remember in all of this. And that simple thing is, at the end of the day, it was Vladimir Putin and Russia who decided to invade Ukraine. Everything else aside, they took the extraordinary step of invading another sovereign nation. And so with that in mind, you know, if we can't agree on that, we should all be able to agree on that. Everything else should fall into place, Jerry. I wanted to get you, let's start there with, am I right in that simple explanation?
Of course. And there are really four sets of misinformation, right?
Yes.
And one is not misinformation in the same way the other sets are. What I mean by that is this, right? We heard 3-4 days ago about the heroes of Snake Island, and it turns out that they are likely alive. They were taken captive. Well, again, as war is happening, we're going to get conflicting information on the ground, which is why we should be careful about reporting Ukraine
100%.
Took out 90 tanks or this happened or that happened. But that's not so much misinformation as opposed to it's war. But however, the other three sets of misinformation I think are critical. Number one, we're getting misinformation from the political class, from the Democrats, and from Joe Biden. First of all, Joe Biden went dark. He left town on Friday, and then hasn't really said anything to the American people since. However, his spokesperson and others are on the cable channels saying things like tough sanctions. Well, that's not true. And let me just give you the evidence of that.
Time out. All right. There are tough sanctions. They are not going far enough, and they are leaving out some very clear and critical material things. But go ahead.
I would say this. There are two responses necessary, and I said this on the air on Thursday as Ukraine was being invaded by Russia. Number one is we have to cut off their oil. We haven't done that. America today will import nearly 600,000 barrels of Russian oil. We will pay the Russians $53 billion today and every day. We still have not shut that off.
And that is key.
All right. And the second thing is what led to this mess are myriad things.
Yes.
However, the number one thing has been Joe Biden's, the progressives, the Democratic Party's fetish with climate change.
Okay, I understand this. I don't want to. I really want to. That's an important part of the discussion, but I really want to focus on the misinformation. And
well, there are two sets of other misinformation.
But hold
right?
on, I want to play something, Jerry, real quick. I want to play this piece from a guy named Ben Swann. I don't know who Ben Swann is. You may know who Ben Swann is.
Why are we playing it? Why are we playing it?
No. We're because Ben Swann is, well, first of all, he's a blue check mark guy on Twitter. Okay. But he's being proffered as someone. He did a piece called Putin's Two Demands, and it's called The Truth in a Minute. And I want to play this because this is what crystallizes the misinformed, misaligned perspective of folks who are claiming that it is NATO's fault or the US's fault. But here, let me go here and play this because I think it's a very good place to start in all of this. Let me play this.
Now that Vladimir Putin wants to retake all of Ukraine and other former Soviet countries, including NATO countries, and that nothing will stop him at this point. But is that true? Turns out that what Putin is asking for are really just two demands from Ukraine in order for his military forces to leave the country immediately. And those two demands, well, they're pretty simple. Number one, he's asking that Ukraine remain neutral, that it become a neutral country similar to Switzerland, not a member of NATO. And number two, that Ukraine remove all of its foreign weapons provided by governments from around the world, including the United States. Now, when you hear that, you might say, well, that's unfair because if that happens, who will protect Ukraine? Guess what? No one's protecting Ukraine now. With all those foreign weapons that are there at this point that the United States has provided to the cost of billions of dollars to U.S. taxpayers, guess what? It only took a few hours for the Russians to actually overrun the entire country.
All right, I'm stopping it there. And this is from, let me see where this is. This is from just a couple. Hold on. This is from just late last week. I guess I thought it was from more recent, from over the weekend. And here's the problem, right? And problems are myriad, but it's founded on a lie. The guy who is putting out something that he calls The Truth in a Minute has fundamentally lied about this.
This guy's a Russian TV news anchor.
Oh, there you go.
All right. There you go. I mean, look, I understand what you're saying here. And it's funny. We're going to have an interesting conversation. I'm not in sync with you in terms of what's the most important misinformation. This idea that this guy just pushed forward it's marginal. It's marginal. Very few serious people are even talking about this. The problem is with the misinformation is you have the Eric, say his name for me, Swalwell.
Eric Swalwell.
You have Democrats like this congressman using that piece from this Ben Swann guy and saying that Republicans are supporting Putin. That's the misinformation.
Well,
they're taking this fringe element and mainstreaming it.
But see, Jerry, here's the problem, right? Is that there are people, and I think you're right. I think the vast majority of people are out there who understand that this is based on Russian aggression, and maybe this is me sort of giving too much into the elitist class and folks who are proffering this kind of stuff from the elitist class. But there is a distinct danger here in this idea that somehow Putin will merely withdraw if the U.S. pledges or NATO pledges to not allow Ukraine to become a member of it, or that if Ukraine disarms.
Right. Although I don't think there's a serious person in the world who is offering that up.
Well, I think that. All right.
No. I mean,
listen. We can say this, but I don't.
Maybe North Korea.
Jared, well, no. Okay, Jerry. I think you're understating this. I think because
but who? Name one serious person.
The problem becomes when things get proffered like this 1997 document that Gary Hart and Bob McNamara and Senator Bill Bradley put out, warning about the dangers of NATO expansion.
But who's putting it out, though?
There's a writer named Michael Tracy put this out yesterday. But
who's
Jerry,
Michael?
Again,
that's my point. Who's Michael Tracy? Like, why are you and I giving any
I'm not giving, Jerry, here's the point, is that I'm not giving credence to what they're saying. I'm saying we have to push back on this. Jerry, you are the person who over the last 3 months has been saying we have to fight, we have to argue, we can't cede any ground to these folks.
This is what I think, though. So I think that it's not the Ben Swann.
Here's the problem. You and I can't argue. The problem is you and I can't argue. We are arguing online now about what we ought to be arguing about, and that's a problem, right? I mean, here's
Andrew. Up until 3 seconds ago, I never heard of Ben Swann.
Okay, that's fine.
And the other guy you just mentioned, I don't know who it is.
Oh, okay, but Jerry, you and I are sort of we look at two different universes in terms of information and the echo chamber and what's out there. And so just because you don't, Jerry, you had never heard of John Schindler, which is fine.
Yes,
but the reality is
that's exactly right.
But Jerry, okay, no, it doesn't mean you're right.
No. I said you're right. Because again, Schindler too is a B-level player,
but he's not a B-level player.
You're highlighting B-level players.
John Schindler has been the spokesperson for the unofficial spokesperson for the intelligence community going back about 7 years. And so just because you haven't heard of somebody doesn't mean that they're not worth talking about. All right, we are getting way bent around the axle here.
But I think we're missing an opportunity, because what matters is the Swalwells, when they take these fringe elements and say, look, the Republicans are supporting Putin. That's the problem.
No, that's a problem, right? And yes, there is a massive narrative problem that is out there. And I finally figured out, incidentally, because I sent you this thing, the thing that made me hit the roof on Saturday night. Was an interview from News Nation, and I haven't pulled it up. I can pull it up if you want me to. On Saturday night, I was looking for clips, trying to find clips from Donald Trump from his CPAC speech to see exactly what he was going to say about Ukraine. And I didn't want to watch the whole 45-minute speech, or other folks had it excerpted in 2 hours. What I wanted to do was watch just clips of Donald Trump. And I came across this YouTube channel called News Nation. Which I didn't know who it was, but it had the trappings. I thought it might be from the Hill. It turns out it is this new objective news effort from the Mediaite site. So it's not unknown.
Right.
And there you had an interview that the Mediaite reporter, News Nation reporter, was doing with a reporter from the Hill. Again, not marginal people, people who are within the mainstream.
Sure.
And Donald Trump gave a speech in which he unequivocally said that what happened that Putin was a bad guy, that what Russia did was wrong, that the invasion was wrong, etc. And the first question out of the News Nation anchor's lips was, is Donald Trump saying that it's better to be friends with Putin? And that's
right. Well, that's a serious problem.
That's
a
problem.
And I think that news anchor would offer that up for two reasons. First, because there's an anti-Trump, still remaining Trump derangement in many a media mind still. But also, I think it's because they're taking these. Look, it's like saying that the Tiki guys are mainstream Republicans. They're not. They were far fringe. And so when you have a couple or more than a couple of these fringe people who are supporting, look, that Ben Swann person is supporting Putin, but no one's no one's taking his argument and forwarding
but that's just
right.
There are folks who are taking it seriously. When something like that goes up, it gets proliferated, and it gives comfort to folks who are not understanding the situation. Part of it gets back to what you were saying earlier, which is the amounts of stories that later get debunked and how that feeds into all this, which is why I sort of started with this one preset.
Well, this goes back to our conversation yesterday, one of our phone conversations where the news media made a big deal over Congresswoman from Georgia, Green, going to this alt-right conference. And I called you and I said, this is great. I said, now we have to deal with this person and instead of instead of engaging in a public discussion about Ukraine, about sanctions, about where we should be, about climate change, instead we got to talk about this idiot congresswoman from Georgia, Green. But and what I said to you is all she had to do was Google the group.
Yes.
And then she would have realized, oh my goodness, I cannot attend, I cannot give a keynote, I can't do that. And I think that's part of the problem here. And I said to you in that conversation, I said, I never forward a tweet or cite something unless I know the source.
Yes.
And I think part of where you are is you get wrapped up in social media stuff more than I do. And so you're seeing some wackadoos on social media, and I think you're going down that rabbit hole.
But Jerry, again, you and I are looking at two different universes of people and where things are going. And so the point is I'm looking at the sort of the foreign policy intelligence watchers world and seeing what is clearly a Russian agitprop sort of campaign that's going on here. And folks starting to talk about this. And had a conversation with a couple of colleagues privately yesterday, in which the Bradley Hart McNamara piece was sent to me as something that I ought to read, and I spent some time sitting down there and thinking about it. But I want to get back to Jerry. Most importantly, and by the way, you can join the conversation 202-381-0083. That number again, 202. I'm sorry, you can text us 202-381-0083. We're not taking phone calls live on the air. But the point here is this: we got down to something last week that I wanted to spend a little bit more time fleshing out. Oh, actually, I want to get before we move on from this, because I want to get into something that you just said, and I want to get back to the myths that are being purported here, and I don't want to focus so much on Joe Biden leaving town over the weekend. We can have that. To me, that's a separate conversation.
But again, the most important thing is that the president isn't addressing what's happening, but what's more important than that?
No, Jerry, the president absolutely should have gone. As soon as the Russians went on nuclear escalation on Sunday, the president should have gone on TV and said something about it. But again, I don't particularly, given who Joe Biden is, I'm not so sure if we're not better off with Joe Biden being in Delaware, honestly.
Well, I don't disagree.
So there you go.
Look, but again, for
me, because time. Hold on, because the reality is, right, what I want to make sure is getting done, and Joe Biden can do this from Delaware, he can do it from wherever. I want to make sure that the sanctions that we've announced that we're putting in place are actually being put in place. I want there to be, and this is not happening, I want there to be the real meat of the sanctions, fundamentally things like the SWIFT system and the impact there, the issue of our own energy independence here at home. We can talk a little bit about that tonight with the speech. And then, oh my God, shocker of shockers, making sure we're not importing Russian oil.
Right.
But my point is that, so Jerry, you totally made me lose my train of thought. Go ahead.
You're all frazzled.
Jerry, I'm frazzled because the part of the problem that we have here is that we have otherwise seemingly rational people who are sort of proffering this nonsense.
But see, here's the thing, Andrew. I don't know anyone rational who's proffering that. Literally no one. Okay. No, I mean, the media doesn't cover this well. They're not talking. I mean, the media is not saying this.
But that's okay. But time out for a second, right? And this is part of the problem that I have, which is that you have a media that is been cheerleading for Joe Biden for forever and a day, and so they are going to cheerlead what this administration
and they still are.
Then you have, other media, which always gets wrapped around the axle when it comes to wrapped around the axle is not the right word. But if there is a war, and the U.S. can get involved in it. They're always into doing.
Well,
that.
yeah,
And so to me, part of
pandemics
my
are good, and war is good for ratings.
And so my natural skepticism, and the phrase that someone used to me the other day, and I voiced my frustration to you on Saturday. The phrase that was used to me is black pilled. We talk about people who are red pilled. Which is coming over the other side.
Yep.
Well, someone used the phrase to me that the media, I've been black pilled on the mainstream media, which means that I am skeptical. And part of the problem, Jerry, and this gets into something you said earlier on, which is you get the story about the soldiers on Snake Island, right? And that story comes out, and we talk about it on Friday, and that's all well and good. And then all of a sudden, Jerry, these corners that we're talking about, that we're saying are not serious people, right? They start saying, hey, the Snake Island story isn't true. The soldiers are alive. The soldiers have been captured. And I'm sitting here going, well, wait a minute. That's not accurate. Clearly that is Russian propaganda that's coming out. And I have no place to go to figure out whether or not this story is true.
Now you hit on something.
Okay.
Now you hit on something. So then,
explain
what you mean by that. Explain what you mean. What you mean by that.
So I start Googling this.
Yes.
I start trying to find it.
And there's no news source.
There's no news source.
Exactly right.
It is either talking about the deaths on Snake Island and the posthumous rewarding of these guys, or it is from other corners of the world that are clearly, I'm going to say this, clearly voicing the perspective, and have been consistently voicing the perspective that Vladimir Putin is not the bad guy here, that Russia is not the bad guy here, and saying that the story isn't true. And then all of a sudden I wake up Sunday morning, and all of a sudden the Washington Post and the Guardian and the other newspapers, New York Times, are all reporting. Now, they're not confirming it, but they're saying that it may be true that the Snake Island soldiers have been captured.
And here's the thing. It doesn't make them less heroic.
No. But that's not my point, Jerry. My point, I agree with you. But the point is that because these stories are being debunked, or the pro-Russian side in all of this is having their pushback confirmed, it lends credence. So when somebody like a Ben Swann turns around and puts out a 1 minute truth video that is flatly not true, or another writer puts out this paper from 1997 from thoughtful men, right? Thoughtful people.
And in 1997, they might have had a point.
And in
1990, or not, who knows?
But more to the point, yes. And we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
A thoughtful paper. I mean, it's like, okay, so now we have to deal with this, right? And it comes back to what you said. You've been saying, for several months now, which is, if we talked about, if you're explaining, you're losing. Well, if you're not explaining, they're winning.
Yes.
And so, that's where I come back to. But time out for a second on that point. The I don't even know how to abbreviate this. The Bradley Hart McNamara 1997 paper comes back with this idea that they were warning at the time. They say two things. They say NATO expansion will cause problems down the road, and B, that Russia is not a threat. Now, Russia may not have been a threat in 1990. In fact, it wasn't a threat in 1997. Russia was literally 5-6 years post-Soviet era. They didn't know what they were going to become. Vladimir Putin was I'm not going to say a minor functionary. He had some responsibility. He was finishing his doctorate in economics, but we did not know what Russia was going to become. And also we had a thought, most folks had a thought, because of NATO's history. I want to get into this. Because of NATO's history, that NATO would not be perceived, there would be no harm if NATO expanded into Central and Eastern Europe. And this gets into something you and I started to talk about on Friday, and I wanted to come back to, Jerry, which is that there were twin unintended consequences of the expansion of NATO. Number one being that it allowed it allows, you expand to smaller countries like the Baltic states or Poland even, or Romania. It allows larger nations like Germany and Italy to sort of sit back and say, we don't have to contribute. While at the same time, nobody really asked the question, well, are we willing to, America certainly never really asked the question, are we willing to commit our sons and daughters to fight in the defense of Latvia? Now, this is me saying, I support NATO. I support NATO's mission. I'll get into this in a second. I don't think there's any harm in having these nations join from a strategic and military perspective, but yet that these are questions that you raised and I raised and that we should be asking. And to be really clear about this, it all comes down to one very simple rule. Again, coming at this, I'm sorry I'm monologuing, Jerry, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this. One very simple precept.
Let me just my 2 cents here. Everything you're saying is it could be an interesting conversation. It's not connected to what's happening in Ukraine right now.
But time out. But some of it is, Jerry, and I'll get to that in a second. But let me. My basic precept is, NATO is not an offensive alliance. NATO is not used for offense. It is used for mutual defense. And so the idea that an organization that exists for the mutual defense is somehow a threat to any nation is ridiculous on its face. The reason why these conversations are important, Jerry, is because it gets into what you and I were talking about last week, which is, okay, what are we willing to do? How in are we willing to get on this? Are we willing to risk, young American men and women in the defense of Ukraine? We can have that discussion. We're Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, etc. That's why it's important, because
you have to separate those two, right? Because we've already made the decision. What's the cliche? The horse is the horse is out of the barn, the cow is out of the barn.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Yeah,
we're not going to commit American troops to Ukraine. However, and this is again from our conversation from last week, we must commit American troops to protect Poland and Latvia and Estonia,
100%.
Which is why I think, again, and we're not doing this, Joe Biden is out to lunch. He's in he's in Delaware eating oatmeal.
Well, I mean,
what we need to do is the NATO, including the United States, needs to put an overwhelming force, a troop presence on the ground in Poland, in those states that border, those NATO states that border Russia, and do it immediately.
I think it starts with I think it starts with, right, the acceleration of the admission of Finland and Sweden into NATO. I think it starts there.
See, here's the thing, and Tony Schaefer actually said this on the program, and Victor Davis Hansen said it last week as well, and that's a conversation to have. We need to reevaluate NATO. We need to reevaluate whether Turkey should be in NATO or Germany should be in NATO even. However, now's not the time to have that conversation. We're in the middle of a ground war in Europe.
I'm just talking about geography here. I'm literally just talking about geography here. And from a geographic standpoint and from an international relations standpoint, a foreign policy standpoint, having Sweden and Finland, because they are on that northern border of Russia, that is important from a geostrategic perspective.
We don't need them in NATO to benefit from that, from the geopolitical, from the.
Well, no,
we could just put troops there.
Well, okay, but that's a whole.
What are they going to do? Stop us?
That's a whole.
See, this is the problem. If you allow Finland in, I have no idea what their GDP is and how much resources they can put into NATO. I have no idea how big their army is. So again. So Finland joins NATO. Why? To put America at risk.
But again, right? If we're talking about, we're talking about the putting troops on the ground in. Oh, no, Jerry,
you're making Swan's argument for him.
No. But putting troops on the ground in Poland and Romania and
because they're NATO states.
No, I understand that they're NATO states, but again, but we're doing this. But are we doing this from a strategic pre-positioning system?
Yes.
Or are we doing this as okay? Then this gets to my point, because again, from a geostrategic perspective, I can pull up the map. It makes more sense. It makes more sense from a geostrategic. Sorry, if we're talking about there are two things that are going on here. One is the check on Russian aggression into Ukraine. The other one is putting a check on Russia itself, right? Because again, let me pull up the map here, Jerry. I'm sorry, because
while you do this, let me express my frustration.
Yeah,
this is a worthy conversation, but it has nothing to do with what's happening in Ukraine right now. It has nothing to do with America's. Nothing.
It does.
Like, I mean, literally nothing. No, it doesn't, because we have to reevaluate NATO. We should have done it already. In fact, I think the previous administration was beginning that conversation. What's the point of NATO if Germany, the largest economy in Europe, doesn't pay a minimum of 2% of its GDP toward
I want to share
defense?
Let me share the screen here. All right. So this is the and for those of you who are listening, I'm sharing a map of Europe here. And now, right, of course, we do have we have the Baltic states here. But the reality is, and those are much closer to St. Petersburg and Moscow. But the issue becomes one. I'm sorry, I'm going to get down into the weeds here. Putting troops in Poland, agreed. Putting troops in Romania, agreed. But you see that Poland, if you look at the map, Poland and Romania are important for ensuring that we represent a check on Russian aggression into Ukraine. But in order to make sure that we have access to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, we need to make sure that we have access through.
We can have military agreements with Finland and Sweden. I'm sure we do, that would allow us forward bases. But do you know what Finland's standing army is?
I don't know.
It's 20,000 men.
Okay,
it's ridiculous.
Yes.
Finland offers nothing in terms of.
Yeah, but again, Jerry,
defense.
but I'm sure you can also look at Romania and Poland and look at their standing armies, and they're also going to be low. But that doesn't mean that we're not. And as you said, yes, they are already members of NATO. But again, we're talking about we're talking about
again that goes back to what we just previously. Wait. That goes back to what we just said. Maybe Romania and Bulgaria never should have been admitted into NATO. But my point is, why have that conversation now? That's the Ben Swann argument.
No,
we expanded NATO. Romania, Bulgaria.
This is okay. We're talking about the justification for two different things. What I'm talking about here is in terms of the brinksmanship of international relations and foreign policy, right? There are levels at which you do this, and this is sort of basic sort of international relations academia. Maybe I'm wrong for focusing on it from the academic perspective. I always used to get frustrated. I'll tell you this. I always used to get frustrated as an undergrad with the language of incrementalism. That we have to do things in steps in order to sort of match and meet what our opponents are doing, and you don't want to go and pull the trigger on literally the nuclear option until other things are exhausted.
Poland's standing army is 8 times the size of Finland. It has 160,000 men under arms. That could be helpful.
Yes, it could be, Jerry. But again, what I'm saying is
there are more New York City police officers than there are Finland soldiers.
Okay, Jerry, again, you're missing my point. We're talking about international relations negotiations here and what you do as a way of countering what your opponents are doing across the table.
But again, our opponent is already in Ukraine. So making an argument as to whether or not Romania should be in NATO, that's a conversation to have after this.
And I'm not having that conversation, Jerry. I'm not having that conversation at all.
Well, you just said, Andrew, you just said that what we should do first is bring Sweden and Finland into NATO.
Yes, we can. Yes, because Jerry, that is an incremental step in showing how serious this situation is. And then at the same time, we are fortifying Poland and Romania and bringing.
No, what you're doing is, I tell you what, I would love to play the game of war with you. No, what you're doing is that you're just increasing your own front. What you do if you allow Finland into NATO now, what you're doing is that you're increasing the chances that you will have to go to war.
But Jerry, okay, but again, by that, okay, now we're getting
right
down to this, right? Well, no, which is to say, right? What did Vladimir Putin do in order to invade Ukraine? Right? He didn't just go in through the Donbass. He put his troops into Belarus.
But Belarus has a different history, and you know this.
No. But Jerry, again, we're talking about you. We're talking.
But you can't compare Belarus and Finland. Belarus is largely Russian.
No, Jerry, I'm talking. You just talked about expanding your front and making your front weaker by expanding it.
Right.
Expanding it. What we're talking about is the policy versus projected power in one specific area, or the policy of encirclement. And I'm telling you that if you have troops that are that much closer, and again, folks who are looking at the map, if you have troops that are that much closer to St. Petersburg, and it's just a simple hop, skip, and a jump, sort of through the southeast of Finland, it's much easier to capture St. Petersburg or to go through Estonia. You can go this way.
Right. And Estonia is already a member of NATO.
Yeah. Yes. But again, you go in through one front and then you go in through several fronts.
Yeah, but Andrew, but you know this, we have limited resources. America no longer has 3 million men under arms. We have
okay,
right.
Jerry, I'm saying in terms of strategy, it increases your options in the same way that encircling Ukraine. Again,
I'm saying what you would do is you would thin out our lines and make us more susceptible to Russian inroads.
What you call thinning out our lines, I call increasing our options in terms.
Well, where would the soldiers come from to go and set up positions in Finland? From what country would they come from? Not Finland, because they only have 20,000 men.
They would come from the other NATO nations that are there. They would come from
So instead of taking French and German soldiers, UK soldiers, and putting them on the border of Poland, we'll put them up in Finland.
We can do both.
See, I'm arguing that we can't do both.
Okay,
and then bringing Finland into NATO makes us less safe.
Because this gets into what part of one of the problems that we have with our conversation on Friday, in that we are forgetting that there are the other intermediate steps that were going on. We were talking immediately about troops on the ground, and we had forgotten about, right? Because we had expected by Friday that through the weekend that Ukraine was going to be overrun, and what we forgot was that one of the things that the Trump administration did do, the leftist media narrative to the contrary, was that they had spent years arming the Ukrainians with the latest state-of-the-art weapons. And so our ability to project force and to multiply force because of our technological sophistication allows us to do more things than our Russian counterparts can do. Besides the fact that our military, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get to a disclaimer in a second. Besides the fact that our military is better trained than the Russian military, and that most of the NATO armies, the standing armies themselves, are professional armies, as opposed to the Russian armies of conscripts, who are not well trained, they are not well supported, they are not well paid. So, there's a real difference in how we deploy our men and our weapons, men and women and our weapons, than the Russians will. I want to make a disclaimer here. Because it's very easy for me and Jerry, as white, and I'm going to say this, Jerry, and I don't mean this isn't offensively, as white overweight guys, who are not serving and have not served. I was a military spouse for many years. It's very easy for us, or it would appear to be easy for us to commit troops in this way. I do not do that. In fact, that was part of what I was sitting here thinking about over the weekend. I would go if I would go to Ukraine. I believe that strongly in this cause. But
again, this actual conversation that we're having is, and again, I love you with all my heart, but this is what frustrates me with watching the news. Two guys pontificating about NATO. It doesn't matter. There's a war going on right now in Ukraine. And look, we're how long into this conversation? Oh, almost 40 minutes. And we have yet to talk about the things that America can do today to stop what's happening in Ukraine. We haven't talked about the George Stephanopoulos interview where Tom Cotton is talking about SWIFT banking and with Russian petroleum and Russian energy, and all George Stephanopoulos wanted to talk about was how Donald Trump supports Putin.
But Jerry, I mean, we talked about it on Friday quite a bit. We talked about it a little bit earlier on, which is this idea of the idea that we are still buying Russian oil demonstrates how unserious this administration can be and is about this situation.
See, that's my point. See, I've watched the major, to your point earlier, where do you go for your news? I've watched every news source, and no one, I mean, other than some of the, and I use this word purposefully, some of the clowns at Fox really is just staffed with morning show rejects. I mean, I other than Brett Baer, I'm not sure who on Fox is Griffin, their national security person. But here's the point: no one has asked the administration. No one has asked Jen Psaki. This war cost Russia $20 billion per day. America pays Russia $53 billion a day. When is Joe Biden going to cut off the oil supply from Russia? No one has asked the question. No one has asked Joe Biden the question, sir, when are we going to get back to making America energy dependent? No one's asked him that question. Yes. I mean, and to me, that's frustrating because the news media wants to prop up Biden, wants to make everything about Donald Trump. And then you have the Swalwells who want to talk about the crazies on the fringe. And meanwhile, I saw on a train station yesterday, I broke down and cried. A 7-year-old boy saying goodbye to his dad. Yes. And meanwhile, and you and I are talking about whether or not Finland should be in NATO. It's so frustrating.
Okay, but the problem is, Jerry, right? And that's yet another story, by the way. The train station story is another story where there are questions that are being asked as to who the father is. What was the father? Was the father Ukrainian or was the father Russian? That's
Andrew, you got to get off You got to get off Twitter, man.
Jerry, I am telling you. But again, there are questions that are being asked. I could pull it up right now. The Ukrainian father is actually, it was Russian, and again, this is. See, I guess you and I came into this discussion today with two different ideas as to what the discussion was going to be about.
Yeah, I did. I'd rather not talk about Twitter trolls.
No, but I don't want to talk about Twitter trolls either. What I want to talk about are the fundamental questions as to how we got here, which is this question as to, the question of NATO.
If I
get to on Friday.
If I didn't know any better, Andrew, from this conversation, again, questioning whether or not that child's father is Ukrainian or Russian, you're picking up and reiterating the disinformation from Russian trolls.
But Jerry, here's the thing. All right, if we are to, again, coming back to the Snake Island story, right? Yes, the Snake Island guys are.
I don't understand, but there was nothing wrong with the Snake Island story.
Well, except for the fact that everybody breathlessly reported that these 13 guys got killed on Friday.
Because that was, my God, again, maybe we should have everyone in America join the army. It's a war. There are 13 men defending this island. They told the Russians to go fuck off. Then the Russians took the island.
Yes.
All right. They're either dead or captured. It makes no difference. They still stood their ground.
Jerry, it does make a difference because the news media reported that they were dead, and then the news media got better information and reported the right information. How the news media covered this was the problem is when the story has legs, and then the enemy can say, oh no, you got the story wrong. It then opens up the door to other stories. The ghost pilot over Kiev, and whether or not that story is real, or whether or not
first of all, it's unlikely that it's real. Look, serious people have said, "Hey, let's wait on this. Let's wait on this." And again, even with the Snake Island, if they stood their ground and they were captured, they're still heroes.
Agreed. But the point, Jerry, the point is, you ask me how I can question the narrative.
But what narrative
You've just, all right, again, coming back to this, the imagery. All right, let me sort of put a as fine a point on it as I can.
Okay.
I approach issues from a rational perspective. I approach issues looking at them and saying, okay, this is correct from a philosophical perspective. This is correct from a historical perspective. This is correct for any one of a number of reasons. I like to approach it rationally. What I don't like to do is have my emotions manipulated, and then later find out that the things that were being used to manipulate me into believing in something are later demonstrated to be wrong. That I don't like. So
but you've studied war, Andrew. If you apply this Andrew standard to how we encourage the home front, well, then you should right now condemn the Iwo Jima Memorial, because that was staged.
Okay, okay, yes, the Iwo Jima Memorial was staged.
Yeah.
But again, if you look at the Second World War, right, we were not duped into getting into the Second World War.
See, but full stop right there. But no, Andrew, because that's the problem with you are advocating, it seems, for Putin.
All right, I take great umbrage at this.
But but you just said 100% how we got into this war. How we got into this war? We got into this war because Putin invaded.
This is my point, Jerry, right. And that's why I led with that point. That is my ultimate point.
But then we took this detour
no, Jerry,
about NATO,
Jerry,
Sweden, and all the rest of it.
Full stop. Again, we got into this. Putin is the person who did the invading. His reasons for invading Ukraine do not hold water. That is the right thing. What I do not like is then having people get manipulated by imagery that is later proved false, because that undercuts the rightness of our argument, right? So if Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, absolutely 100%, and then we entered this and we decided to finally enter the war in Europe. If we later discovered, we'll talk about Gulf of Tonkin or the Maine or what have you, right? Which is incidents that are later proved false as a precept to drawing America into war and getting Americans cheerleading.
But Andrew, there is no look. The Snake Island story. The media reported that these 13 died as heroes. If it turns out that they stood their ground and were captive, Ukraine is still. So what you're saying is that because the Snake Island story, may have been over-reported or exaggerated rather, then it's not true that Ukrainian fathers are leaving their kids at bus stops. That
it is. The point is that it makes you question the imagery, and as one person points out and debunks X, and then the Ghost of Kiev story gets debunked, and Jerry.
But none of those stories have risen to the level of seriousness. Like, I'll give you an example. Last night in New York,
time out, Jerry. Which stories have not risen to the level of seriousness?
The Ben Swann type propaganda
no.
has not risen to any serious level.
Time out, Jerry. Time out for a second. Okay, setting aside Ben Swann and Ben Swann's 1 minute, of truth. The point is the Snake Island story did rise to the level of everybody talking about it for 24 hours. Then it began
but no one leveraged it to say Putin might have a point.
No. Time out.
Yeah.
All right. Time out for a second.
Yeah.
nobody leveraged the Snake Island story to say Putin had a point.
Right.
It was leveraged to say we all need to get up and stand up in arms because these men are dying on this island. We have to support these heroes, right? And
Sure.
then the folks who are supporting Putin and think that Putin is right were able to then turn around and start questioning the story.
See, that's my point. Who?
Jerry, I've told you this. Literally,
the Ben Swans
yes, but Jerry,
the trolls.
So
you're right.
No, Jerry. But the point is, when the trolls are right, when their stories are proved correct, it becomes a problem for those of us who are trying to argue the correctness of a position from a rational perspective.
But
that's the problem.
Yeah, but again, Andrew,
because Jerry, it gives
Andrew in New York City. Liberal bastion. Joe Biden got 90% of the vote. The Metropolitan Opera over the weekend started and sang the Ukrainian national anthem.
Saturday
and
night
everyone
on Saturday began to
and
do
everyone.
this.
But my point is
I understand this, Jerry.
Is that those arguments that they're captured, not dead on Snake Island? It's not rising to the level of seriousness, and I don't understand why you want to give it a stature or an elevation that it doesn't deserve.
Jerry, I'm giving it first of all, part of it is that again, when I talk about these things, some of it is that I talk about it from a personal experience, right? And I talk about how I approach issues, and I focus on issues and come to rational decisions. I'm literally talking about me, right? Me hearing this and then being forced to then turn around and go and do research and to discover that something isn't true. I don't like personally being manipulated. That's me. I don't like being manipulated.
Then Andrew, then you don't understand how war goes, because
Jerry,
there's going to be
I do understand how war goes.
No, then Andrew, then you shouldn't.
Jerry, the point is,
but Andrew, you shouldn't be so. You shouldn't be. Andrew,
go ahead.
If you understood, then you wouldn't be so shocked at the Snake Island story. I mean, there will be 1,000 stories like this out of Ukraine, because people need heroes. People need, sometimes they need to be exaggerated. A football coach doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, but that's warfare.
No, I understand this, Jerry. But I'm someone who believes that if the position is right, then the truth tells the story for itself.
Okay, but in human history, what you're saying has never occurred in war. What you're laying out has never happened in human history.
I don't think
Achilles,
that's
true. The Greeks, of course it's true.
Okay. D-Day. I mean,
you don't think that the U.S. Whatever was the precursor to the CIA, exaggerated and created heroes that weren't such? Of course they did. Of course they did.
I'd like an example of that. I don't think there is any way that you can.
Well, I'll give you one example. I mean, one example is not D-Day, but Iwo Jima is an example of that in World War II.
But
completely staged event. Staged.
I understand this.
It's a memorial in Washington, or in the outskirts of Washington D.C. at Arlington Cemetery. Complete propaganda, complete staged event.
And I understand the idea that we have these. Abraham Lincoln never sat on a throne like the way that he did, and
right.
I understand I understand that, Jerry.
So Snake Island offends you, but Iwo Jima does not.
No, Snake Island does not, Jerry. Snake Island does not offend me. I want to be really clear about this. The story of Snake Island, the heroism of the men on Snake Island, the fact that they were captured. What I don't like is the fact that stories get reported and are blown up that are not true as a way of manipulating people into supporting a cause that they should otherwise support because of the rightness of the position and because people are incapable of telling a story. We talked about this. Listen, we talked about this on Friday. We talked a little bit about the Gulf War, right? The second Gulf War and the invasion of Iraq. And one of my great frustrations at that point in time, as I tried to explain to the White House liaison to conservative groups, I said, all you need to do is put up a map again. Oh, and I could have stopped sharing this map of Europe a while ago. All you need to do is put up a map of Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran in the middle, and that demonstrates the case for you. regardless of anything else that's out there. This
Andrew,
demonstrates
there's a reason why a prize fighter or an MMA fighter comes out to rock and roll or hip hop.
Yeah,
because
Jerry,
in order to motivate
entertainment.
people to fight or to motivate people to support your warrior, there is a level of manipulation and propaganda. There is.
Okay.
Always.
Jerry, listen, I think we,
and I don't even think Snake Island was propaganda
by trying to undercut it by saying that comparing it to entertainment. But
it's human nature. My point is, it's human. My point, I'm not the reason why I bring out the MMA is because people who are listening will understand, right, viscerally, that look, a football team, right, listens to heavy metal music before they go play, or right. I mean, we need to be motivated. It's part of it's part of human nature. And so if the Snake Island story, what happened with the Snake Island story was that it was reported too soon.
Agreed.
But it doesn't.
And Jerry and the other. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I don't think that it. Look,
and
a lot of smart people have said.
Soon.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that we have to be careful. Let's make sure, look. This is the problem with the media. Period.
Absolutely.
There's a shooting in Atlanta, a police shooting, and the media goes right to, racist cop. And hey, let's take a step back and let's see what the facts are.
The Nick Sandmann case is a primary example of this.
Right.
And so you have to do these things. And as I said, listen, I think you and I came into today's show with two different ideas as to what we were going to be discussing, because I thought we were going to be really pinging off of things in the conversation on Friday that we didn't get to. One of which being the issue.
Well, one we didn't get, we never got to the fact that the news media, instead of talking about sanctions, instead of talking about climate change, instead of talking about America's military has been gutted, we're talking about Donald Trump. Yes. That's a problem that actually our conversation could point towards a solution. You and I aren't going to figure out NATO today, but we could hold accountable. Like, we could have a conversation that reminds people who are watching the news, hey, when you're watching ABC and they're focused on Trump, or for instance, there are news reports. There are legitimate news reporters of Morning Joe, MSNBC, from CNN, who are reporting that Donald Trump's 3-month delay in providing weapons to Ukraine is the reason why we're in Ukraine today. That is something that you and I can talk about and actually educate our listeners. But arguing over whether or not we should have troops in Finland or Romania should be in NATO, that's a good conversation, but let's have that after we push Putin out of Ukraine, I think, right? No. I mean, listen, I think that's true. But except as we're talking about the narrative as how we got here, talking about this idea that NATO never really presented a threat to Ukraine and or never really presented a threat to Russia. That's important to have that discussion, and as to why, and I agree with you. I think that's where I was really going to go, and then we sort of got completely derailed on this other side of it. Who's your buddy? Cameron Gray.
Cameron Gray, yes.
You need to go have a conversation with Cameron Gray about your social
Jerry,
media.
So you keep coming back to this and not wanting to, and it takes us away from the what we are literally talking about.
Andrew, in my mind, you're reading conspiracy nuts on Twitter, and
Jerry. I am reading what the propagandists for our enemies are saying.
But who? Right? Okay. But I again.
But Jerry, here we're getting wrapped around the axle here. I mean, we're coming back to this, and we keep coming back to this whole thing. I'm sorry, I am getting frustrated here because sorry, go ahead.
You're right. I would never have played Ben Swann because he's a nut.
Okay.
Why do we elevate him today?
Jerry, because I think it is important for our listeners to hear what our opponents are saying so that when they are confronted with this kind of propaganda, they know what to say in response.
And all right, good. And I'll be
having this discussion
yeah.
of whether or not it's appropriate to play Ben Swan and then dovetailing into an argument over whether or not Finland should join NATO, when we really should be talking about why NATO is not a threat and why and whether or not this ends here. That's really where we should have gone.
But here's my point. The greater problem for the propagandist is the George Stephanopoulos interview with Tom Cotton. That is a legitimate American anchor on a major channel spending 15 minutes not talking about sanctions or climate change or any of these issues, but rather talking about Trump. The real problem is that there are serious people in mainstream media focused totally on Donald Trump.
And the problem, of course, and again, I think that is a problem. And the problem of Andrea Mitchell wanting to spend all of her time talking with Mitt Romney, who in retrospect,
right. Yeah.
Obviously, these are issues. But again, this comes back to where I think you and I had two different ideas as to what we needed to do. Listen, I know you have stuff you need to do. You are on tonight.
Andrew, I'm just trying to figure this out. The world right now is united, unprecedented in the last 20 years in terms of pushing Putin out. I don't see where. I just don't see where these propagandists from Twitter are having an impact on the unified agreement that,
because Jerry, all it takes is for the right story to be proven false and public support dies. That's the danger here. And again, it takes hitting on the right. Remember that we have to be right 100% of the time. Our enemies only have to be right once.
And that's why I think
my fear
for our listeners, with every report, and we've said this before, there was a report early from Saturday, right, 2 days after the invasion, that the Ukrainians had killed nearly 4,000 Russian troops.
Yeah,
and I said, well, wait, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but let's wait. Or they destroyed 90 tanks. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Let's wait. The problem is, but this is again a problem of our news media, where they want to be first rather than right, and that's the Snake Island. But the sentiment is still the same. I understand why Zelensky would want to use the Snake Island story, because he wants to motivate his people to fight.
Okay, but my point, this is why, Jerry, I started with the very basic precept. Here is how you know that Russia is wrong and Ukraine is in the right, and those who are supporting Ukraine are in the right. That's why I started there, so that folks understand that here's where the underpinning comes from. And then we move on from there. And that's why it's important in the end. But I want to come back, because I know as I said, your time is short, and we were only supposed to go for 45 minutes. We've gone for over an hour here. You're on tonight from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Yes. The ungodly or ridiculous segment, 11 to 2 a.m. on BAL. I'm going to have Eric Hargan on. I'm assuming, and I should never assume, but I'm guessing that this president is going to want to talk about Build Back Better.
Yeah,
and he's going to want to declare victory with COVID. And so we're going to have Eric Hargan on. Eric is the former acting Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services. He's going to come on and respond to the domestic policy stuff. And then we'll get into, I don't know what this president is going to say about Ukraine. He's been dark for 3 days. And America hasn't done what it should do. We again, today, America will send $53 billion to Russia for nearly 600,000 barrels of oil. Today, America hasn't changed its climate change policies. We haven't opened up Keystone XL. We haven't allowed for fracking or for drilling. So I don't know.
It all
what the
comes down to
president can
this:
offer.
is the president going to come out tonight and say that the state of our union is strong?
Well, he can't, right?
Oh, I think he will.
I mean, he will.
I think he's going to, I think he's going to say it, and he's going to say that we are strong in our resolve against Russian aggression. And the reality is that you and I've said this, that, Joe Biden, in the same way that Brandon Scott could be the greatest mayor that Baltimore.
Yeah, you're right.
Joe Biden could be the greatest president America's ever known if he would simply turn around and I'm gonna take a cue from what you just said, Jerry, and tell the environmental movement to go fuck itself.
Yeah.
And do this. I am in for Derek Hunter, the now nationally syndicated Derek Hunter, next Monday and Tuesday. Heard on station in Baltimore, but also around the country, Texas, Nevada, I think Iowa as well. I got to go look. And then you and I are going to do another Andrew. I think we're going to do an Andrew and Jerry Save the World tomorrow. Andrew and Jerry Save the State of the Union.
Yeah, we're going to have a follow-up. Maybe we should do a pre-call and make sure that we're both on the same
what we're
page.
talking about here. Yeah, probably. All right. All right. So listen, we'll catch
we
you
should
all
name
tomorrow.
we should name this one Andrew and Jerry have a good argument.
Well, yeah, but I like the Andrew and Jerry can't wait. Andrew and Jerry can't wait to have a good argument. All right, folks, I'm gonna stop the live stream here. Have a great night, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.